All right. Well, no. I've always assumed that I am taller than I actually am. All right. Our next speaker goes by many names: poet, writer of the environment, musician, beekeeper, excellent Ole impersonator, eater of pickled herrings out of tiny plastic buckets. Legend has it that he once did a three-point turn on a dirt road to nowhere in the middle of Montana in a van with a trailer hitched behind it. The trailer was stuffed with the belongings of poets. The van was full of poets. Legend goes on to suggest that he took the same behemoth van-trailer combo up and then down the tallest mountain in the Yak Valley in close pursuit of that elusive, rascally creature of the woods, the writer-activist Rick Bass. This is a true story. Some have said that our next speaker is very nearly the world's preeminent scholar on the life and works of Liberty Hyde Bailey. If you get a chance during intermission, you should ask him to prove this. Rumor has it that our next speaker is a rabble-rouser. Many will tell you of his rallying cry that fires the blood of disgruntled poets and brings them under one flag. He says, "I would just like to sit down and listen." Our next speaker is one of the best listeners I know. He is quiet, thoughtful, open-hearted, curious. During his tenure here at Iowa State, he has been a voice of reason and guidance for the MFA students. Someone who so carefully absorbs the feelings of his community that he's able to advocate for their rights with passion and honesty. He has been the driving force of many communities here at Iowa State. He has taken hundreds of students on excursions through our very own Casey Woods to teach them that school and that writing is not just about the classroom, but about experience, about the muscles that you move when you wade a creek or when you climb a tree. He has bravely faced bureaucrats, marched for the rights of the 99%, huzzahed for the joy of such earthly miracles as soil microorganisms, the first snow blanket of winter, the mysterious magical appearance of guinea fowl in the midst of a beast-bereft campus, all with one dictum: let's just sit down and listen. So I ask you now to listen to the wise words of a poet, writer, activist who listens to the world so he can engage with it truthfully. I am honored to introduce John Linstrom.
Thank you, Geetha. That's so nice. How does this thing work? Well, is this good?
Great.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I like Bailey. That's true. My thesis is part exploration of Bailey, part sort of historical investigation of my hometown and what it means to be rooted, or to think that you're rooted, or to want to have roots in a world where we're all moving so much, kind of hovering around, especially in this academic atmosphere, where you don't know, you could have a job on the other side of the country next year, probably no. I mean, none of us have jobs. But part of what I'm doing, so Bailey grew up in my hometown, and I was really surprised when I found him and started reading his work, how much he spoke to me. For someone who died in the 1950s, was born in the 1850s, lived through the Civil War, both World Wars. And part of this project has been a conversation with Bailey. I actually literally have letters between all the chapters of this thesis, where I'm just asking him questions and I'm arguing and I'm trying to understand how to live the kind of beautiful vision he had in a world that's so very changed. So I'm just going to read excerpts from I'm going to read the first letter of the thesis and then the last part of the last one. Maybe it'll make sense. Also between them, I'm going to give you a Bailey quote that will make the last line make more sense to you. So I think that's all I'm going to say. Dear Bailey, I want you to know that I know where you lived. I have visited the cottage on the lake you called Bailiwick. I walked around without the permission of the Girl Scout troops to whom you sold the land. I took pictures and peered in your windows. And I know all too well the room where you slept as a child. I have spent more time than you would care to know in that house. I have been paid to sit in it, walk around in it, thumb through the refuse of your family's past. I have slept in that house, lying on the floorboards, listening for your ghost. I have stood outside of Sage Place, shaking, angry with your own beloved daughter that you could give the place away for student housing, leaving all the literature from your library on the shelves, thinking the students might read it. Angry that I didn't have the courage to knock on that door and search the place like I have your family's home. I have touched your birth certificate, your wedding certificate, your childhood glasses. I have hefted your father's ancient hoe. I have read your mother's poetry. I have photographed hundreds of pages of correspondence, some of which I may never even read. I have stood in the room where you were born and 4 years later, where you watched your mother die. I have rocked the rocker in which she rocked you. And I followed you before I even knew you. I had biked the South Haven road that bears your name, had set foot in your house as a bored and disinterested child on a field trip, had even dated the descendant of one of your in-laws before I knew who you were. That's true, I found that out. I was already reading the work that once inspired you. I stood on the same bluff along the same freshwater sea, had built sandcastles on the same Lake Michigan beach that you once knew so well. And all before I knew you at all like I know now. I have traveled across the country to the unkept mausoleum that bears your body. I stood on my toes to see between the bars and into that space where ancient stone plaques had fallen from their places and cracked into bits. I breathed the stale air, cement and dead leaves, and I turned to look down the hill to Lake Cayuga. And the next day I tore through archives of your personal papers and found the scrap of paper where you had written in that flamboyant, airy hand that you would forever look over Cayuga's shores. Sometimes, in my chase of you, I frighten myself. Or more accurately, I am frightened by how you seem to keep leading me on. Don't think I didn't notice on the plane from Denver to Newark and en route to Ithaca after passing over Lake Michigan and not seeing a single wave through the stormy sky. Then, the rift, the way the clouds parted right over that Michigan harbor, the distinct twin piers and the sloping shoreline. I looked at the flight map and looked back out the window. I took it all in, my spine tingling, and when the cloud cover closed again, I turned back to the biography. This all started with that biography by the man who never met you. Philip Dorff took your life, the fragments that had already been preserved in so many memories, and passed it on to me after even his death. And that's when I started searching. When I found John, the caretaker of your birth home, who had fallen as obsessively for you as I would. And John took me in, gave me work to do, handed me your manifesto, The Holy Earth, and told me it would change my life. John has dreams about you, you know. One summer, while we were working at the museum, he told me the one where he saw you looking up as from a crypt, preserved like Lenin, a single white lily in your still hands. Your head faced west, John said, toward your hometown. My dear Bailey, that's what your old friend Walter Wilcox called you in his address at your 90th birthday party. Not Liberty, not the family name Tom, but just my dear Bailey. My dear, we are linked, and we are simply more inseparable, it seems, with time. Your 96 productive years on this earth weigh on me, a young 25-year-old and in good health, strangely. Yet I am not the only young person in the world to feed so incessantly on the ideas of one long-dead writer and his high ideals. Perhaps I'm in better company than I think. I'm inspired by your books, and I am inspired by the way in which they've been forgotten. I keep trying to find you. I want to bring you back, Please, stay with me. Please do not grow old. I need you. I think maybe more people do too, but I'm not sure I understand why. But this book is my attempt to push the question. It is a marvelous planet on which we ride. It is a great privilege to live thereon, to partake in the journey, and to experience its goodness. We may cooperate rather than rebel. We should try to find the meanings rather than to be satisfied only with the spectacles. My life has been a continuous fulfillment of dreams. L.H. Bailey, the last words from the speech he gave for his 90th birthday celebration in Ithaca, New York, 1948. I don't have answers, and I don't know how to bring this letter to a close. I'm trying to make my life on a vast but shrinking planet, my dear Bailey, and I know what you will say. I am young. Before he died, James Nash, the ethicist I told you about, told us that joy would be requisite to our ability to effect social reform. Joy. Joy in simple gatherings, in the birds of the neighborhood, in the skies that surround us no matter the weather. It was a warning against the old romanticism and for the maybe older content that comes from living simply. It's what the directors at Holden called a just and humble lifestyle in 1981 when my parents met there. It's what you meant at the end of your 90th birthday speech when you said that we should try to find the meanings rather than to be satisfied only with the spectacles. And again, you once wrote, "Let us have the commonplace, for indeed it is rare." I remember I once met a couple friends at a predetermined spot on a predetermined day in a January blizzard in Indiana. We found each other by faked owl calls, and we gathered in a circle surrounded by trees in all our winter gear. We were college students, and we wanted to start a secret society. Each person brought a piece of inspiration. We read passages from Frederick Buechner, Dr. Seuss, and Walt Whitman. We giggled and made plans to take the campus by storm. We would print off leaves of poetry and philosophy and leave them all over campus. We would scrawl cryptic messages in imagistic code with chalk across the university's sidewalks, and we would leave little signs here and there where they would be seen only by a few people to make those people smile. We were strategizing the salvation of the world with tiny bits of joy. You wrote in the 7 Stars that we need to balance the view of the landscape with the view of the flowers. And you seemed to imply that the view of the flowers may be the more difficult for someone with too much schooling. We were planting flowers that year. You wrote in Universal Service that how to work with enthusiasm for oneself and at the same time to work with enthusiasm with one's fellows is perhaps the major problem in life. And then you proposed so boldly, so fearlessly, a society of the holy earth, a society not meant to exist for the sake of organization or to operate parliamentary machinery, a society with few officers but many leaders, one controlled by motive rather than by a constitution, in which the associations will be fellowships of the Spirit. Then you wrote, its principle of union will be the love of the earth, treasured in the hearts of men and women. To every person who longs to walk on the bare ground, who stops in a busy day for the song of a bird, who hears the wind, who looks upward to the clouds, who would protect the land from waste and devastation, realizing that we are transients and that multitudes must come after us, who would love the materials and yet not be materialistic, who would give of himself, who would escape self-centered commercial and physical valuations of life, who would exercise a keepership over the planet. To all these souls everywhere, the call will come. Dear Bailey and dear Earth, we have heard that call through the centuries, the millennia. We do not know where we are headed, but we begin to apprehend that the joys are everywhere, waiting to be loved. We hear around us an undertone of life that yearns for continued reverberation. We sense that we are neither the end nor the beginning, that we have come in the midst and will leave like that. And while we are here, if we are to flourish, it will be in life, in the protection of it. We embrace vulnerability and uncertainty in the face of great love, and we reject self-centered egoisms and self-righteous dogmas. We are the new frugalists, and we must stand for the little wonders and the delicate things. We see we are everywhere bounded by waves, bounded and liberated by the washings of memory that lap at our shores. We taste the sand in our cheeks and wonder. We seek first to understand and to love. We live as plain members and citizens, as keepers and cultivators of health. We are winged and clawed and swimming and creeping. We are rooted, but we are not entrenched. Dear Bailey, we find ourselves in your footsteps, and we take off in new directions. We haven ourselves where we are and work toward the cycling of new ages. Our lives are the continuous fulfillments of dreams.
Yeah.